My name is Cheryl Johnson, and welcome to Salon Talks, where we celebrate the creative expressions and cultural heritage in the African American community. Today, I have with me Mr. Doug Hooker, musical composer and engineer, I believe, and musical director Trey Clegg. Today, they are going to talk about an exciting new project, and I have to read because it's a long title, but it's called Without Regard to Sex, Race, or Color. And it's a Black History Month musical celebration. And I'm going to let Mr. Hooker tell us about how it came together.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here with you and your audience today, and of course with my brother, Trey Clegg, who is one of America's outstanding organists and music directors. So without regard to sex, race, or color, believe it or not, is actually part of the inscription on the dedicatory bell in the Morris Brown College Tower. And that inscription reads, "This bell is dedicated to youth without regard to sex, race, or color." And then it goes on to say some more things. My Symphony takes its title from a book of photography that was done by Atlanta-based photographer Andrew Filer, in which he photographed parts of Morris Brown College during the years when it was going through its bankruptcy. Of course, fortunately, it's emerged from that now.
Right, exactly.
Full accreditation. It's a wonderful thing to see. But Andrew, in his photography, want to focus on what are as a community and as a country valuing, and how are we allowing these precious institutions, our historically Black colleges and universities, that have done so much to contribute to leadership, not only in the Black community, but the whole nation. Why are we allowing them to struggle like this when they've been such a major force and for making this nation a better place? And so that was his first book. And as his book was being exhibited around the country, he asked if I would consider a musical collaboration with him. Andrew and I have known each other for the better part of 20 years, have been very good friends, and a lot of civic and community work during that time. And over the last 10 years or so, I've just grown closer through our art, learning more about his photography, more about my music. And he asked me if I would consider writing something in response to his book. And I said, I'm honored to do so, and I'll do that. And about midway through my composition, because I envisioned a three-movement symphonic work, his second book was coming to life. And that book was called A Better Life for Their Children. It was about a unique partnership between Booker T. Washington, whom we all know, the founder of Tuskegee Institute and now college, and a man that history is pretty much forgotten, whose name is Julius Rosenwald. He was the president of Sears and made Sears the big retail giant that it was for many years in the 20th century. And Julius Rosenwald was a white Jewish businessman, born basically in middle-class heritage. He never struggled in that regard, but his parents taught him the value of work and the value of charity and community. And he always believed and had a heart in his philanthropy of trying to help African Americans progress in the post-Reconstruction South. And so these two men came together and they formed a program called the Rosenwald Schools that put almost 5,000 public schools for African Americans in the former slave states. And that program almost universally transformed Black life, Black community, Black culture. And through it, many of our civil rights leaders were educated in Rosenwald schools. And so Andrew asked me, hey, you want to continue that collaboration and write your second movement? Yes, I did. And then the third movement is about an unknown future. But anyway, I'm sorry, I'm being long-winded.
No. Well, it's a very interesting thing, especially for those of us who love Morris Brown and we've watched the comings and goings and drive past and say, please, someone save this school. That he undertook this project at a very critical time and really brought a lot of attention to those outside of the community about what an important institution Morris Brown has been to not only the African American community, but in creating leadership that went across this country. And we're excited about where Morris Brown is right now in their journey. So this is a great way to celebrate their advancement and their resurgence. And so we're excited about that. And then to talk about the Rosenwald Schools. I actually know about the Rosenwald Schools because in my other world, I'm a preservationist. And so I know in the state of Georgia, we still have at least two structures, and just really the importance of those communities in maintaining those structures as a beacon for higher education and for hope for their communities. And so to have these two ideas inspire you as you're creating this new musical composition. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall, but but tell me, when you started this process, how do you start even the composition process? What do you do?
Well, this is real. It's a great question, and this one was unique because previous to now, all my compositions have come out of my own personal experience, my emotional state, being very angry, being very depressed, being very happy, whatever, and experiences I've had in my life. And this is the first time somebody asked me to write something. My apologies for that. Asked me to write something in response to observation of their life and their work and their values. And so I was honored. It was a very different kind of approach for me with this because I had to spend a lot more time doing researching and studying Andrew's book and Morris Brown. Of course, I know a lot about Morris Brown being a civic and community activist here for many years, but spending more time about what he was trying to say, and then learning more about the history of historically Black colleges and universities more broadly, because I wanted my musical story not just to talk about one college and one institution, however precious it is, and each one of them is precious, but talk about the suite of them, the whole collection of them, and how they have made such a huge difference in this country, and just remind us of their history. So I had to spend a lot more time studying their history collectively, and that was very informative for me. And then without the second movement, talking about a better life for their children, I want to focus on the partnership between the two men. We often say leadership matters, but then we also often lose sight of how leadership in critical times, coming together in small ways is often lost to history in terms of the important things that a person or a couple of people or a small group of people can do together in a powerful way. And these two men who had come from very different walks of life, a white Jewish businessman, very rich and everything else, and a former Black slave, now self-educated, an educator himself and founding education, but they both believe, one, in improving African Americans after the Civil War and their lives, and they're giving them the opportunity to prove themselves. And they both believe that education was a primary vehicle for doing that. And being introduced to each other, coming together in their partnership, that to me was almost a statement of what America can be when people walks of life come together to help realize more fully what the constitutional promise is, that all of us, men, women, Black, white, and otherwise, are created equal. And certainly we believe that, I believe that in my own spiritual life, as does Trey. And so I spent a lot of time studying about those two men, HBCUs, and I began to think about, I want to pull on both familiar themes to help ground the audience in things that sound and resonate familiar, but then introduce my own melodic themes and harmonic themes to help enhance that work. And so that's how I went about the process of developing the first two movements. And the third movement is completely different because it's unknown future. And so I use chorus and orchestra and soloists with lyrics to talk about an unknown future in which we are no longer judged by our race. And I'll actually leave it to Trey to talk a little bit more about that because he speaks to it so eloquently.
Okay, let me say this. Well, let me ask this quick question. How long did it take for you to compose this music?
The duration was 2 years. Andrew asked me in October of 2017, and he knew at that point in time he was going to have a premiere of his exhibit at the National Civil Rights Museum at the Lorraine Hotel in Memphis, which is where Dr. King was assassinated. Asked me if I would consider writing it for that occasion. I told him I could get through it one movement by then. I couldn't get it all. So the
That's,
first
yeah.
year, and for a smaller ensemble, this one's for full orchestra, that one's for a much smaller ensemble. That was premiered in March of 19. And by that time, he said, I'm working on
Let's do the second. Right. Well, we'll get back to the conversation about how important it is for new works to be created by African-American composers at this time. But I want to bring Trey into the conversation. Trey is the musical director of the Trey Clegg Singers, and he is an organist, and he is professor of music at Spelman, I believe, and that he has been part of the Atlanta community for a while, just developing great musical talent. And we're excited by this collaboration. So Trey, tell us what it felt like to be brought into this piece.
Thanks, Cheryl. It's so nice to see you. It's overwhelming. I can't even contain my excitement about this. Studying Mr. Hooker's work has just been getting into the mind of a musical genius. He's a dear friend and brother. He sings in my church choir at First Congregational Church downtown, and he's also in the bass section of the Trey Clegg Singers because he's a gifted singer himself.
Oh.
And so, oh yeah, and so he's written
multi-talented.
A Renaissance man, like crazy, So he's written a cappella choral works for the Trey Clegg Singers before, which we've performed and recorded, but this is the first time that I'm seeing his work as an orchestral composer. Cheryl, wow. I mean, you just have to come to the performance and hear this. And to know that I get to conduct this work and premiere it in all three movements by a composer who I so profoundly respect. And you may know I champion works by African-American composers. Right. Have my whole career. So, this is the orchestral score. It is.
Now we have the props, right? That's 2 years of work. Yeah.
So
listen. Let me back up a second, Trey, because a lot of people don't know about the Trey Clegg Singers and the important place the creation and why you created this group. And what type of dedication you have had to presenting African-American composers and diverse composers at this time and place. Tell us a little bit about the Trey Clegg Singers.
Sure. Back in March of 2016, almost 6 years ago now, I had a real burning passion, and had for a long time, but in 2016, I made it happen, to bring gifted singers together of diverse backgrounds to learn about not only each other's music, but about each other's culture. Little did I know, some 6 months after I brought the group together and chartered it, that and please excuse me for I have to speak my heart, that the White House would take the dark turn that it did. And so we, in those 4 years of history, were able to bridge a lot of gaps through the arts, you see. And by the way, Mr. Hooker wrote a piece for us when that November of 2016 happened, out of his own feelings about that turn of events in our nation, that illustrated Lord, grant us peace, grant us mercy. And so we really took that piece to heart and performed it all over the place for folks. But when I first started the group, it was probably 90% African-American, because that's where my life is. And it's grown to be very multicultural, which is what I wanted, And so we sing pieces in multiple different languages and from styles, various countries, various genres, obviously classical, but gospel, jazz, R&B, some hip hop, as we bring a diverse audience in, racially diverse, generationally diverse, socioeconomically diverse, right? you name it, both in the chorus and the audiences, you know. So
Wonderful.
that's where my heart is.
So this is a diverse choir that is taking on this world premiere, which really is reflective of the overall work that Mr. Feller is doing with his photography, really talking about how these institutions and these communities are interwoven into all of our history. Why is that important right now in this country to say, yes, we stopped to celebrate Black History Month, but is it really Black history, or is it all of our history? And how should we be teaching this to a larger audience? And one of the ways is through a creative piece such as this. Of course, the arts are always what we look at to bridge, but at this time in this place, it seems to be more critically needed than ever.
Yes, I would agree with you so much, Cheryl. And Andrew and I, Andrew Filer, the photographer, and I, when he first asked me and I asked him, well, what do you want? And he said, I want what comes from your heart, from your creative thinking. He said, you know my mind, you know my values, and we certainly do know each other. And as we have gone through this process of my creation to mirror his creation, we spent a lot of time talking about our hopes that our work individually and collectively will, one, remind people of important history, but more importantly than just remembering history is how do we apply that history and its lessons going forward? So from the history of the historically Black colleges and universities, which I'm glad they're getting a lot more attention now, but they certainly have gone through a long period of not getting the attention they deserve. They still have a critical need. And some people ask sometimes, well, why do we even need them? You know, everything's all integrated now. But there needs to be a safe place for young Black children and young Black adults as they are maturing to find themselves, define themselves in ways that are not hampered by their race, which is what the broader world would tend to do to them. And so the HBCU environment provides that safe space for them to explore and begin to stretch and test their full possibilities as human beings without being thought of as being Black first, right? And that will be critically needed well into the future. It's unfortunate, but it's fortunate that we have them. That'll be needed well into the future. And then also the Rosenwald Schools and that the lesson of the partnership and the possibility of collaboration, making for enormous change for the better. And not only advancing African Americans, like I said, but advancing the prospects of this nation. People who have heard about Rosenwald Schools don't often realize that a lot of our civil rights leaders learned their life lessons going through Rosenwald Schools, their parents going through Rosenwald Schools and pass it on to them. So our beloved recently departed Congressman John Lewis studied at a Rosenwald School, Medgar Evers, Maya Angelou, members of the Little Rock Nine, and I could go on. There's so many more. Right. A lot of our artists, too, either learned at Rosenwald Schools or were the recipient of the Rosenwald Fund support for creative arts for Black artists in the 1920s, 30s, and beyond. So, yeah, it's important that we not forget our history, but also more importantly, that we seek to apply the lessons of that history in the present to make a better future. And we all know right now, when we have some unfortunate people in our community questioning whether we should even teach about race because we don't teach it, which is a bunch of hogwash, pardon my language. If we fail to remember it, if we fail to apply the good and the bad, then we doom
it will continue. And I have to give a little anecdote. So I grew up in Atlanta in APS schools, had a great musical teacher all the way, had, I'll call Miss Mary Scott, and she was a great musical educator in Atlanta schools. But our music book, the two songs that still come to my mind sometimes, we sung the national anthem of Pretoria, South Africa, and Dixie. Both of those songs were in our songbooks. And I say to myself, sometimes I catch myself, I said, why am I singing this song? But I sung it as a third, fourth, fifth grader in an APS schools. So when you tell me we can't teach certain things, that was so far seated in my brain that I didn't even know what it was till I went to college and started talking about apartheid. And I realized I was singing a song about Afrikaners. So, you know, we have a long way to go still. We have a long way to go. So tell me about how excited you are about this world premiere that's happening on February 6th, correct? At Georgia Tech First Center. Tell me about how exciting it is to premiere your work on such a stage.
You know, first of all, anytime you compose a musical work, you're always grateful and excited when you have a chance to have it played anywhere in the world. To be able to do it in my hometown and be able to do it at the college that I went to school with. I was one of the earlier Black graduates from Georgia Tech. And this is the 60th anniversary of the matriculation to Georgia Tech, to Blacks to the Georgia Tech campus. And so it's a little bit of symbology for me, and to do that in Black History Month is just ultra special. But the most special thing about this, for me, quite honestly, is to have a conductor and a partner of the quality of Trey Clegg and a chorus like the Trey Clegg chorus to surround this wonderful assembly of orchestra musicians. We have musicians from the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra, from the Atlanta Orchestra, well-respected musicians who are known through this community in their individual and collective work. And to have that quality of people who are willing to step up under Trey's baton and to interpret this is, somebody asked me, well, are you going to play in it? Or are you going to sing it? I said, no, I'm nervous. I just want to.
You're going to sit back and watch Trey take all of it.
I know he's going to do it with it. Having sat through some of the chorus practices, I know how good it's going to be, and I'm just excited to hear it all coming together. So I don't know how much more I can tell.
Okay, Trey, tell me about bringing it all together, because I mean, it's one thing for it to be on the page. It's another thing to bring it to life. Tell me how that process has been for you.
Absolutely. That is a great question. And it is a process, you know. I work with my students, my fabulous students at Spelman College all the time with understanding that rehearsal process of doing just that, you know, getting the music off the page and off the stage and literally into the hearts of the listener, you know. And so all of that has just, you know, we're all on a life's journey together. And I think teaching college students, working with college students has really helped me to be a better rehearsal technician, if you will, with my own chorus and conductor. So, you know, when I start the process of teaching a new piece, let alone a new major work like this, I chart the course of so many rehearsals and what I'm going to do in each rehearsal, sort of like planning the semester with students, you know. And by the end of, you know, this rehearsal will accomplish these goals and thus on and so forth, you know. And then when we get to so many weeks out before a performance, the chorus has it. And then at that point, we're simply fine tuning the sound, you know. And even last night, Cheryl, in our rehearsal, the soprano section hit this groove. And I'm getting chills just thinking about it. It was mind blowing. You know, I've been working with them on getting this particular sound, this blended, beautiful sound that articulates Mr. Hooker's text, and it happened.
Wow.
Man, I would rather do that than eat. It was fantastic.
Well, you are hyping it up, Trey. We're excited now. We're excited. So those of us who are here in Atlanta, we're looking forward to coming out next week. And is there any way that this is going to be broadcast so that a larger audience might be able to see it one day?
You know, we didn't think about trying to set up for a live stream broadcast. We are going to have it professionally recorded by an excellent a videographer, CJ Johnson. And it probably will reside on the Trey Clegg Singers YouTube site at some point in time in the future. That'll be determined by Trey and me working together. But for the time being, the best way to get it,
you got to be there. We're all gonna be there and enjoying it. And I thank both of you for coming out this afternoon and having this discussion with me and sharing your joy of this project with all of us as we go into Black History Month 2022. We just are looking for all of the opportunities to come together as community and to feel uplifted, because we need it right now more than ever. So I'm excited, and I hope to see you next week. And for those of you watching, we thank you for joining us, and come back again soon to more Salon Talks. Thank you.